Unlocking California Politics. Today we're joined by Assemblymember Heather Hadwick, who was elected to the State Assembly in November of 2024 and is serving her first term in the California State Legislature. She represents areas of northeastern California and has experience in emergency management and local journalism. She currently serves as Vice Chair of the Environmental Safety and Emergency Management Committee and is a member of the Budget and Insurance Committees and more. Welcome, Assemblymember Hadwick.
Yeah.
First, congratulations on serving your first term and now the end of your first year. So now that you're here in Sacramento, what has surprised you the most about being in the legislature?
Well, thank you for having me. Oh, the biggest surprise. That's a good question. I think it was the divide, and not like the party line divide, but rural versus urban divide. Because I come from Modoc County. There's less than 9,000 people in my whole county. I have 11 counties in my district, so very, very rural. And we live so differently. And most of my colleagues are from urban areas. So we don't have the same problems. And so they don't know what they don't know. So I feel like I spend a lot of my time just talking about issues that are very rural centric, but I also need their help to get votes and get things done. So I feel like a lot of it is teaching.
So you described it as kind of an urban-rural split that you didn't expect. So would that be fair to say that occasionally rural Democrats, you might actually have commonality on certain issues that surprised you?
Yeah. So, my district's very conservative, but most of our big issues are bipartisan. So wildfire, education, workforce stability, and just having that. We have a huge workforce shortage, especially for licensed or trained employees. Medical access. Most of our stuff is bipartisan in my district.
What inspired you to run for office in the first place?
This was never in my plan. I grew up in a tiny town in Siskiyou County on the Oregon border, and was the first person in my family to go to college. Went to college to be a teacher. We owned a newspaper, and I taught for a while, and then became an emergency manager and did that for the sheriff's office for almost 5 years, and then moved on to the county office of ed, doing it for them. And I think OES kind of throws you into the world of politics without you even knowing, because you have to know how everything works and how it interacts. So I got to build a lot of those relationships, worked with the Dallies a lot because they were both on the emergency management committee. And then I had just built relationships in all of these counties. So I was asked to run, and I was like, well, I'm just a regular person. I don't know about this. But after we prayed about it and had a family meeting, because it changed our family life a lot. And it's been good. It's been a really good fit, I think, because there isn't a lot of voices for rural. And I love where I live and grew up there. I want my kids to come back and live there. And I think that really means something in this kind of a business, so that you're here for the right reasons. And so far it's great. We've gotten a lot done. Okay, great.
So there was not one sort of deciding factor, just kind of all these things together?
No, I would have kind of laughed at you if you told me this was my life a few years ago.
So you've discussed kind of how OES played a role in your decision-making, but you also mentioned you're in journalism, and did that play a role to some extent?
I think definitely, especially with supporting small businesses. We owned a very small newspaper in Doris, and my mom had owned it before us, and so I think having a small business, we currently still have a small business. We run the county's only pumpkin patch in our county. I think especially just having that mindset of, California we keep making it harder for small businesses. And I want to make sure that we're not doing that, especially for our rural communities, because we don't have those big box stores. We don't have the same kind of capacity. Almost all of our businesses are small. And so I want to make sure they can survive, so that my small communities can survive.
Now, you mentioned one of the splits that you noticed was the urban-rural, but you knew you were also coming into a Democratic supermajority, which has been there now for quite a while.
Yes.
How is it working in that environment as a Republican, and how are you finding that?
It's really all relationships. So I've worked really hard to work across the aisle, and I try to focus on the things that we can agree on. And there's a lot that we can agree on. we're pretty broken. So there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. So I try to focus on those. I try to bring people in that anytime I can, that on those things that I know that we can agree on. And at the end of the day, we're all people, so I feel like it's that relationship and be nice. I mean, you get a lot farther with honey.
Right.
In my opinion, anyway. So I think I've done a good job working across the aisle and want to continue that.
Yeah, and that's great. And that's something we love to hear, that people kind of getting together to solve the problems more than getting stuck in ideological, silos.
Yeah.
Housing is one of the biggest issues in our state right now.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your priorities in the housing arena?
So just lack of for my district. Rural is really hard. I was just talking to my staffer, Taylor, that's here with me today. We had a barn roof blow off of our barn, and we're 3 hours away from like construction companies and roofers. So I couldn't even get an estimate. So, having that access for rural communities is huge. And how do we keep that going so that they have enough business to want to come to these areas? I have certain areas of my district that have huge growth. Reading is pretty good. Tahoe, I have Tahoe.
Right.
And where Tahoe has the capacity, and they have TARPA and all these groups that help them. Most of my communities are unincorporated, very small, so they don't have that growth, but we have the need. So I want to help streamline those processes as much as possible, and just encourage people to. I talk a lot about career pathways, and like encouraging people to get into the trades and to open businesses, and that entrepreneurial spirit that keeps rural California alive.
Right.
Just trying to encourage all the way around because it's a lot of working together for housing. I mean, people think housing's just one sector, but it's really the ripple effect of everything. So
one thing you've mentioned is the need to attract business, attract housing. Is that the consensus? Because sometimes we see in the Sacramento area areas that are where once rural start to get more attention, then people are like, "Whoa, what's happening? we didn't really want this kind of growth." Is there a bit of a tension between that, or is there more of a welcoming of development?
Well, I don't have any communities that have had that, probably, other than Tahoe is a very that one's hard because it's so popular. So Tahoe, we definitely want to keep that quality of life of rural and forested areas, but then then I have other communities that they would love to have a subdivision with 20 houses in it. Okay. I have a lot of our schools, we have teachers that can't accept a position because they can't find a house to live in. Oh, wow. And at all. So I have teachers that are living in fifth wheels because, in a camp trailer because they can't find a house. So any of those licensed professionals, I have schools that are looking into building their own homes for their staff. The hospitals, a lot of the little hospitals own like cabins or apartment complexes so that they can have somewhere for staff to live because it's just such a barrier for us. So I think it's figuring out a way to have that incentive, and also for rentals too, because rentals are even harder to come by in the smaller towns. So just trying to have that balance of government and good government, and not make it so hard for people.
Interesting. Okay. So have you seen that as more state impediments, or are there also local impediments to building?
I think it depends on where, and my district's just so big. So I go from the Oregon border down past Sacramento to Amador and Alpine County. So, and each community is a little bit different, but have a lot of similarities. I would say the counties are usually pretty open, and they want the growth, and the red tape typically comes from the state. Okay. Interesting. It depends on the area. Like Tahoe's going to have more red tape, because they have more oversight, because of just the environment, wanting to protect Tahoe, and so important to so many people around the world, really. But I would say definitely the state.
Were you encouraged by some of the movement? It doesn't mean you endorsed all the bills or anything like that. Some of the packages that were sponsored by the builders and Assemblymember Buffy Wicks and other members of the Assembly. Were you encouraged by at least some of the movement?
Yes. Yeah. I think there was a lot of strong change, I would say. Change is hard in my district as well because
Mm-hmm.
it's small. I think those smaller communities have a hard time with change sometimes. But I think there was a lot of like the CEQA,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of
Right.
restructure. That's huge for us
Yeah.
because it's not just housing for us. It's also all those wildfire mitigation projects
Mm-hmm.
and fire is a big deal for us. And then anything that simplifies insurance, that's always going to help us. Because I think my district, I don't have the data to back it up, but I'm pretty positive my district's been hammered by the fire insurance crisis more than any other
Right.
district in the state.
So that was a nice segue into our next topic.
Not even on purpose.
Into our next topic, which is fire. As you mentioned, your district has had its fair share of wildfire activity, and you serve on the insurance committee.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of fair plan, probably communities in your area where they can't get insurance. What are your thoughts basically on the
so I think I have a unique lens on this too, because I come from that emergency services background and I'm on emergency management too. In my opinion, whenever we're talking about insurance, we should be talking about fire as well, or disasters in general, especially in California. We do have a lot of customers on Fair Plan, but we have a lot of people going without, and that's what scares me.
Right.
And most of them are seniors. And if, God forbid, something does happen to their home, they don't have the means or the budget to go buy a new home in this market. And I worked fires where I had to go tell people their house burned down and they didn't have insurance. And then I've worked fires where they didn't evacuate because the house was all they had and they didn't have insurance. And, and people have lost their lives, trying to protect their home. And I hate that it's gotten this bad. And I think there are ideas coming. I'm very direct with my constituents that this is not going to be a fast turnaround. And their policies are probably going to go up. But that we have to level that out and get the market back. And just be better. Because usually California pays the most of everything, right? So for decades we had some of the lowest property insurance in the nation. That's not normally something we get to win, Right. So I think we're playing catch up and that comes with a cost. And then we've had these massive fires on top of that, and it's heartbreaking. But I think our seniors are getting hit the most, and they also don't have that extra in their income to cover all that either.
Well, it's interesting. A talk I went to, and I repeat this often, is where they said rate suppression only took us so far. Risk suppression is the direction we all need to move to. And we're seeing a lot of that. Do you have any thoughts particularly about, for example, 0 to 5, the ember resistant zones, about the viability of getting everybody on board, or any?
So I think we have to completely flip-flop the way we think, and we need to get more proactive because we're paying for it on the back end. And until we get more proactive with fire mitigation, nothing's going to change.
Right.
And it can't be a one-time thing, because these projects, when you go in and you do those fire mitigations and you reduce the fuels, which the fuel is the only part we can control, so that's where we should be focused. In my opinion, that's the best, bang for our buck. But until we do that and we make it consistent that we're going back every 5 years to redo those projects, because it all grows back. So it's got to be a long-term plan. And so far we just haven't been successful convincing the majority that should be our plan.
When you say the majority, you mean people actually, the homeowners, or
no, I mean
or legislators?
The legislators. But I'm very encouraged with the fire, the discussions around fire this year, because I think it's a lot more. The LA fire was horrible, but it made it real. It's been my reality for the last decade, in Northern California, and something we've just sadly gotten used to, being plagued by fire. And it wasn't their norm. And I always tell people you can't unfeel it and unsee it, and you can't take that fear away. So it made it more real for them. And, in those fires, the Dixie fire was in my district. It was almost 1 million acres. I mean, you can't, it's unimaginable.
Yeah.
but it really did change the way people look at fire and recovery. And I talk about equity a lot when I'm talking to people about it, especially my Southern California colleagues, that we've had all these fires and we didn't get a special session. We didn't get,
right.
100 plus executive orders, and that's an equity thing, and no community should be more important than another.
Right.
In my opinion. So when they're frustrated with something about a process, because theirs is going pretty quick compared to ours, or in the past,
right.
I try to bring that up, that we had communities that their schools shut down and didn't open.
Right.
They have, a lot of just the capacity and administration and their county level and the city level, where we don't have all that, we don't have that expertise or the money to fund any of that. So it's different for us. And it's a reality I wish we didn't have, but it's where we're at right now.
No, our membership within C.A.R. was very sensitive to that.
Yeah.
A lot of people, even, Santa Rosa and other people are like, wait a minute, what's, the attention. Look, again, it was one of the biggest fires ever, et cetera, not to downplay that.
Yeah.
But the degree of attention, I had one colleague state, and I thought it was an interesting comment. They go, this is the first time a fire has happened, a major fire where people have 1 million Twitter followers.
Yeah.
All the attention came because in part these were people broadcasting what's happening to them around the world.
Yeah.
And it created that attention. But hopefully that attention, as you mentioned, in terms of equity, starts spreading to all the areas.
Well, and I think it made us have those conversations and a lot of lessons learned, right? We've been the people they've been learning lessons on,
right?
So there are some practices that are much better now, especially with the recovery process. And OES was really why I wanted to run, because it's just so complex and people don't understand how it touches everything. I mean, really, emergency management is in every sector. You really have to have a good understanding of how things work and how they work together. And the recovery process is painful. And everybody shows up when there's flames and right after, and then everybody leaves and all the help and support leaves.
Right.
So, and recovery takes years, 3 to 5 years. Greenville's still recovering. And, and LA has more. They have more progress in 6 months than we had in 3 years in Greenville,
Although you're already in certain areas like Altadena, you're seeing people selling lots who would prefer to stay, but just can't afford to have 3 years or whatever it's going to take.
And that's what happened in Greenville. Then the school closes, then the businesses close, and it's really hard to recover. And especially when it hits a town so hard.
Now, you mentioned, for example, people who go without insurance because of the lack of resources, or they have to make kind of see what pencils out.
Yeah.
What about in terms of the mitigation? So, for example, 0 to 5, or some of these other mitigation, the 100 feet for certain types of under the Public Resources Code. In terms of getting people to do that, is there a resource issue? Is it a will issue? What do you think it is in terms of getting people to? Because sometimes there's resistance to compliance we've seen in some areas.
Yes. I think part of it's education. I think Paradise, we learned a lot about like wood chips and not having wood chips near your home, and I think that's just like spreading that word. And then it's the access for especially elderly that can't do those projects themselves. And so then if you have elderly or low income, in our area, I found that I'm very proud to be from Northern California because we do things mostly out of necessity and survival, but we've been doing things well for a while that I just assumed were happening throughout the state, and they're not. We have really strong fire safe councils that go out and do those programs for our veterans, for seniors, and do the clearing, the brush clearing or trim trees, or they have a chipper programs, a lot of those just to keep their fire-wise communities. So we've been trying to press that, like how to become a fire-wise community, what that looks like. And we've been trying to work with insurance companies to see if we can get credits for that or lowered, that kind of thing. And then I have talked directly with Fair Plan because that's not taken into consideration, like the old fire scars and what those mitigation purposes, but they've let me submit just single residences that have done all this stuff and re-looked at them because of that. So I think that's in the works. I don't know how fast it'll happen, but it definitely needs to be taken into account because it's not, a lot of these fires are so harsh and they burn so hot that they might not come back, and and if it does, it's going to be 20 years.
Right.
So, so they shouldn't have to pay those huge high premiums because the fire danger is less, but maybe not on the state maps or the state.
Right.
We're going to have to get to where it's parcel by parcel, but the capacity of that and what that looks like is it's going to take some time.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, one thing we're cautious, finger crossed, as you mentioned, we also have often discussions with our own membership about, where the first step is getting available insurance, and it's not necessarily in the short run. Hopefully it'll be better than fair, but it may not be, affordable in the way you're thinking about it. And we're also cautiously, again, hopeful, fingers crossed, everything that, since risk modeling is now going to be a part of everything, that you can also then potentially risk model the good things. And the mitigation efforts.
Yeah, and we should give people, we should give them credit for taking those, taking the initiative and doing that. We also have to figure out how to get people off the FAIR plan and back into that private market. And I think that's going to be a lot of the discussion this year.
Right.
Because it's supposed to be the end result, and not the answer forever.
Right.
And other states have ways to get people back into the private market. And so that's going to be, I think, talked about a lot this coming year.
Right. The one thing I'm part of, I attend functions and seminars and meetings with my national counterparts with the National Association of Realtors. And it didn't make me feel, it wasn't a great feeling, but it was like, oh, it's really bad elsewhere too. And so that was the only thing that made me feel a little like, and not better, but I was like, okay, so we're kind of middle of the pack but it's just the scale of everything here. The cost of everything is so dramatic.
Yeah.
Because they looked at some states where it didn't seem insurance was high, but then compared to their home price, the insurance rates were insane.
Yeah.
But,
I have a lot of out-of-state family, and I pay less than all of them.
Really? Wow.
And, but they also pay higher property insurance too, so it's you have wins and losses for every state, but there are a lot. I was shocked that there were FAIR plans in all the other states too, and so we've been looking at a lot of that and trying to compare and find, we even had informational hearings with, I think it was Arkansas, Missouri, had some of their programs. I think one of the bills that passed was a roof program, like a roof replacement bill that was based off of, I think it was Arkansas. Hopefully I'm not getting that wrong, but and it's a great low income program that will hopefully help some people be more fire ready.
Yeah. When our organization, our leadership has had meetings with the Department of Insurance commissioner. When he's conversed with us, he's often mentioned Louisiana, Texas, and some of the things we hadn't had to think about in the past in California that now that they've been confronting for actually many years.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to see how we're starting to have to look at so many different possibilities. Yeah,
because we're usually the leader in all of this stuff. So, but and ours is just it's a bigger platform, right? Just way more people and broader, largest state, just larger states, and so it's one of those many challenges.
Something that C.A.R. and the realtors have advocated for was, as you're probably aware, the California Dream for All investment program for first-time home buyers to get into homes. Are there any things that you think would also help get more people into home ownership?
Oh, so I think, having the stability in their jobs and the employment. And I think this generation or the last couple generations move around a little more in their employment. But no, I think those programs, especially for the smaller communities that I represent, are huge. My mom, I was raised by a single mom, and she purchased our first home when I was in high school. And it was through like a low income program through the city. And they also remodeled the houses. So she got to pick her fixtures and all that stuff too. But it really, and then it was a loan through the city with no down payment. So it encouraged low income. Yeah, it was very cool. very cool program that really helped improve our whole town. They have 15 or 20 houses now, and it really set us up as a family, especially with, a single mom raising 3 kids. But now she owns 3 homes, and was able to like sell one and then buy a bigger one, or she paid off, 2 of them are paid off, and that's part. Now she's a landlord, and that helps with her retirement. But it had she not had that program, I don't know that she ever would have been able to own a home,
Yeah.
So but I think those programs, and I think educating people that it's the investment side is worth it, because I think like the younger people don't want to think that long term. And when you're paying rent, you just get in this cycle of paying rent, and we have to almost make it cool again to be a homeowner, if that, in the simplest form, I guess. But and making it just attainable. I think a lot of people have given up.
Right. I know. And that's nationwide.
It is. Like. Yeah. Yeah. And my kid's 20, or my oldest is 20, and I don't know how he'll be able to buy a house in California. Especially in the places we want to live. It'll be 10 or 15 years probably before he'd be enough, out of college and in his career enough. But he goes to college in the Midwest, and he can go buy a house there for $75,000, and it's hard to argue. Like I'm hoping his family is enough that he'll want to come back, but it's hard. It would be really hard to be a young person right now trying to make a life in California. So whatever we can do to help simplify that and encourage it, I'm all in.
And that was a great, what you just talked about with your mom. That's our story in a way.
Yeah.
Whenever we talk about home ownership,
success.
About building equity, and how home ownership can really move, especially for middle income people and you don't come from money.
No,
and it's the way.
Well, and it really changes your neighborhoods, right? I mean, you have if you notice that those neighborhoods that have more homeowners in them are usually more well kept, and they're more invested because they're going to be there for a while, and so it really does change the community. So
now that you've completed your first year, what are you most proud of in the past year?
Man, so I tied with a senior Republican with 10 bills through the Assembly, which is great. I'm very proud of that. I think
great.
I think we'll end up with 6 probably signed by the governor, but we'll see.
Actually, that's very impressive.
Right? They're all they were very local district bills that, but we worked really hard, and a lot of educating people, why this need. But
that shows you are able to work with the majority party.
Yes. But I would say our biggest win was our budget ask. We did a bill as well, but we didn't end up needing the bill for all of the fire victims from 2021 to 2024 that got settlements so they could be tax exempted. Because the governor, after the LA fires, he put out that 25 to 2030 would all be exempted, and it's usually fire by fire. So, and I think most people don't know that. And I think the average voter or average fire victim doesn't realize that they're going to have to pay taxes on this stuff. And I do not think the state should be making money off of fire victims. And we're one of the only states that does. And federally, they don't have tax on it, but the state does. So, so we're actually going to get that retroactively paid back for them if they've already been paid.
That's great.
And then a lot of them haven't got their settlements yet. But the Dixie fire was one of those fires that wasn't included in the exemption. And there was like 7 fires, and I think 4 or 5 of them were in my district that weren't exempted. So that's a huge win for everyone in Northern California. I think it's only fair,
So on a bill like that, how were you able to build a consensus for it?
A lot of talking, a lot of conversations. The bill went through pretty easily. They've been working on it for years, so it had already been kind of in the conversations. But we also tried to look at it from a different perspective. Like, hey, if we do have fires later, we want to make sure that this is forever. We added up all of the property base for Tahoe. Everybody knows Tahoe. In my district, that's probably the most famous area. So a lot of our fire bills, we added up the property values for each assembly member because all of the assembly members except for one have constituents that own houses in Tahoe.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like a lot of Bay Area people that had millions and millions and millions of dollars in value of property there. So my fire mitigation stuff or fire, just any bills that were about that would help protect their constituents, property. So I think trying to tie it into them and I think with the LA fires, it was a little easier to talk fire and there was a lot more empathy because it made it real for them, So lots of conversations. I try to bring people up to the district as much as possible too.
Oh, that's
so
good. Yeah.
we do that. They do forestry tours every year. And we bring a bunch of like Southern California legislators up and show them mountains and forests and how far away everything is, because the response times are really hard for them to understand that, we have volunteer firefighters. We don't have, big city fire, like funded fire departments, and you might be 40 minutes for a response and they can't comprehend it until they see it, So, I love to show off my district. So I try to do that as much as possible.
Right. Yeah. Great. So we have a lot of members who like to get involved and be involved. What kind of things would you recommend for them to get involved with their legislator or to make their voices heard?
Well, I love it when my local people reach out to the office and say, I'm going to be in Sacramento for this meeting or this conference, just so I can get to know them more. I think definitely inviting the office, especially in my district, government isn't their first, like, oh, we should invite them to our open house or we should invite them to our holiday party or, we like to have those opportunities to be able to, break bread and hang out or go have coffee or anything to just build those relationships. I'm very focused and I want my whole team focused like that. So just like making sure we're in the loop and then those stories. So that's what I always ask of my local people, realtors especially. Tell me those stories about that couple that waited 10 years to save up and buy a house or the couple that, or the house that they couldn't get insurance on and didn't sell for 3 times or, like those personal stories are the ones I tell on the floor or tell in committee. And that is the only thing that I've been able to change people's minds is based on those like personal stories, because typically they can think of somebody in their life that's had something similar or, or had some kind of challenge like that. And it makes it go more to the heart, and is a little easier for them to vote for or not fight. Sometimes it's just that, like, can you just not fight me on this and, or abstain for me, or something. But those definitely like having those stories, even if it's just emailing the office with a story or connecting it so we can, showcase something in our newsletter or that kind of thing. Just keeping that line of communication open.
Assemblymember, this has been a very good conversation. I have one final question for you, which is, we are in polarized times right now, and it seems often very challenging to enter the political arena. Yeah. You have people responding often, without thinking too much, maybe in the moment before they respond on social media, et cetera. How do you kind of cope with all that? Or are you fortunate enough to be new enough in your area, friendly enough that you're not facing that? Or what do you think about all that right now?
I think that's one of the hardest parts. When you run for office, it opens you up to everything, right? More criticism, more everything. I think it's harder on my family than it is me. Okay. But I think that we need people in here that care and that just want to make a difference instead of playing political games. So I think and that know their districts, that really like know their districts and are here to vote for their districts. And that way we can get more done. If we could skip all this theater political stuff, I would love it. That's part of it. And I deal with it, but I really want to get stuff done. That's why I'm here. I want my district to be great. I want my kids to be able to live there and make a life, and my future grandkids and for generations. because rural California is really being hammered right now.
Right.
And we have different challenges. So I'm here to work, and I hope that's what other people see in me.
Mm-hmm.
I try to ignore sometimes you can't ignore it, but there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of hate in the world, period.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I think politics just takes it to a whole nother level. But
yeah, and it seems more and more the anonymity of social media, I feel.
yes, yeah, it's all right there and in your face.
Right.
And so I hope that there's enough that we can agree on, that we can get some good things done, because California deserves it.
Yeah.
It's, we have to be better for the people that live here.
Thank you so much. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It was great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Today we are joined by Assemblymember David Tangipa. Assemblymember Tangipa represents areas of the Central Valley and the Central Sierra region. He is particularly familiar with the issues that are of relevance to the California Association of Realtors, as he is a realtor. He is currently serving on the Housing and Community Development, Budget, and Human Services committees. Welcome, Assemblymember Tangipa. So, Assemblymember, you're one of the younger members of the Assembly. I think on the cusp of Z, millennial, right on that borderline of Z and millennial. How do you think that affects your perspective in working in the Assembly?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I've been referred to as a zillennial, which is the latest of the millennials and the earliest of Gen Z. I didn't I had social media growing up pretty much right after or right around that 8th grade year and on. Gen Z has grown up in social media their entire life. The millennials got it a little bit later, so I'm right in that middle position. But I do think that I am the only member now. I have to say this now, currently still in my 20s. I do turn 30 next Tuesday. So I get to say that at least for one more week. And I do think it brings a different perspective because I realize what California is kind of in today and what really the next generation wants. And I'll tell you this, it's really not as much as the divide as people really think when it comes to Republican or Democrat. The divide is if we have the same future our parents had or not, if we have the same opportunities that others had or not. And I can just tell people in California today, no. And the biggest opportunity is actually just the opportunity to leave our parents' home, to buy our own home, and to not depend on anybody else. And I think that's what we crave. I think my generation really craves that. And I just try to bring that to the forefront as often as I can because I have so many friends, people within my family, others that I grew up with that just feel so hopeless because they feel like there's a never ending rat race that they can actually make it to the end of the tunnel of just being able to live on their own, save up some money, find a good job, buy a home, not depend on their parents, and just move on with their life. And so, like I said, as much as I can hammer down on that part as a zillennial, I'm going to try to do that in the capital as much as possible.
Is that something you sometimes feel that maybe some of the older members maybe don't feel as acutely? Like maybe they hear it from their kids, or but maybe they don't feel it as lived experience the way you have it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you'll hear it in the language that older members often use and not only that, the older generation, hey, you should just, save up more money and you should, uh, just cut down on cost and do that. But when I look at, I think there was a stat that I was reading that I had to deal with back in the 1990s, the average middle income wage was about 64 to $68,000. That has a purchasing price in California today in our current numbers of $200,000
Mm.
or more. But
Uh-huh.
you could find a 65 to $68,000 job in the 1990s fairly often. You could find them all over the place. How often are you finding 20 to 40-year-olds getting 219,000 paying
Right.
jobs? That is not as often. And so when we're looking at it that way, and when the older generation just tells us to work harder, save up more, and do more, I don't think that they realize just how different the window of opportunity and affordability really is there. And I think that's what I again bring to Sacramento when I'm telling them, I was like, no, you can't just when we created laws and rules and regulations that create artificial scarcity that drive up the costs because of the cost of government, there's no saving up to beat that. The inflation is killing us, and that's a silent tax that people don't talk about. And just the cost of everything is something that, hey, I can work as hard as I can, but again, this never-ending rat race seems to be getting away and accelerating faster and faster away from us. That the next generation or the older generation really needs to see that that window of opportunity that they had back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s is not the same for their kids and grandkids. And I think that's a message that's actually really resonating with them.
And it sounds like my next question is going to be about what motivated you to run. It sounds like you kind of answered that. Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of what motivated you? It sounds like a lot of that was to bring that perspective and to bring a voice to those concerns. Would you say there's anything else that you would want to add to that in terms of what motivated you to run for office?
Well, it's a big part. I love the state of California. This place has it's changed my life. It's changed my mother's life. My mother was an immigrant from the island of Tonga, and she came here for a better opportunity. We've all heard that story about those Navy guys find an island girl, have a secret family. The punchline to that joke is actually David Tangipa. And I grew up in low income housing that was just really disadvantaged, mainly because of rules, regulations, and policies that actually really hurt North
Hmm.
Highlands, California. I grew up right across the street from McClellan Air Force Base off of Poplar A Street. And I got to see what happens when somebody makes laws or decisions that can just devastate a community and people don't actually backfill and actually try to work for it. I had the chance to go play football at Fresno State. And through education, I quickly realized that there are things that we can do in real estate to break generational poverty. And that's where I started my business, targeting areas like North Highlands, Fresno, the Eastern Sierras, and just trying to help people break that generational poverty and get into asset ownership. And then I kept seeing how fast it was getting away from my generation. And where I've always told people that policy is the best way to affect people's lives for the better or for the worse, just depends on who's making it. And when you look at the state of affairs that California is in today, that we're the fifth largest economy in the world, it is too hard to live in the most prosperous nation and the most prosperous state that grows the world's food, that has the most resources, and that is the most beautiful place in the world. And we need a different perspective in Sacramento to actually just bring together and say, can we be better Californians? And that's what I wanted to do. And really, what motivated me to run for this office. But not only that, one of my biggest reasons was actually SB 14 from 2023. That was a bill that Senator Grove ran that would have made child sex trafficking a felony, equivalent to arson, robbery, and burglary. Now, again, I said I grew up in North Highlands, California. That was one of the number one areas for trafficking and human trafficking in the state of California. I have people that I am close to, friends and family that actually were involved with child trafficking. And it's something that I take very personal to fight on. And when Sacramento leadership killed that bill in the Assembly Public Safety Committee, I knew that the people in Sacramento needed a wake up call. And it's why I actually ran, because if child sex trafficking is arguable in this state, then there's no way in hell that I think people can get the cost of living right, insurance right, utilities right, the cost of housing right, unless we bring something different to Sacramento.
Something you mentioned that you took a career to help people achieve investment and home ownership opportunities. You are a realtor, or still.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I do need to update some things. I will say I've moved brokerage a couple times, so
And as part of that, you mentioned investment opportunities, but also helping families achieve home ownership. How do you think that informed your approach to housing issues?
oh, I think it's like I said, it's the number one dream that a lot of people want, to know that you can walk into your home, lay down, and call it your home. And so when I was helping, again, friends, I have a friend that actually he ended up becoming the national commercial for Union Bank because we used the Wish program that he put $5,000 down and they would match it. For every $1 he put in, they put in five. So we got a $25,000 grant on top of that. Now, they were able to buy in North Highlands. The house was about $280,000. That house now is worth probably about 565. And They only had to live in it 5 years as their permanent residence before they could sell it to qualify for this. They are now thinking about selling that home and purchasing a bigger home because their family has now grown from having 1 child to now having 3 children. That is what asset ownership can do for people, and just getting into it. I've been able to help over 60 of my friends and family married together to really just get into that first step. And I think, again, if anyone was going to gentrify North Highlands or Fresno, it was going to the people that's from the community. And I targeted these smaller scale homes, $250,000. And I would tell them, you will either buy now or you won't be able to get the chance in the
Yeah.
future. Because as people get priced out of the Bay Area and LA, they're going to look into California before they look out of state. And that is exactly what has happened. Even the average home price in Fresno is about 435 to 450,000. Those are the highest prices we have ever seen being in
Right. No,
Fresno.
you know.
They're the lowest prices anyone in from the Bay Area or from LA has ever seen. So to them, this looks like a fire sale, and to us, it feels like we're drowning.
No, I get it. I moved to the Sacramento area about now it's almost 10 years ago from the LA area. And the thing I still tell people is $1 million home in Sacramento looks like $1 million home, as opposed to most of the Bay Area or even Los Angeles at this point. Where $1 million, you're just like, really, that's $1 million home.
I have a
Uh,
friend who just bought a home for $1.1 million. It's 820 square feet. It's a 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom, but it's in the middle of, like, downtown San Francisco, and I told him, I was like, "Why would you even want that? I would rather commute like, 2 hours every day than buy a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, $1 million home in the middle of San Francisco." I just couldn't do it.
there was probably a bidding war for that too. but
Probably.
um, so you're a freshman Republican member in a Democratic supermajority legislature. So how do you build relationships to advance your priorities? And have you found members on the Democratic side who maybe are willing to collaborate with you on key issues? And so basically, what's it like being in a supermajority when you're in the minority party?
It's very interesting. You often get treated like a glorified advisory board when you are in the super minority. But there are instances where, again, you could just work, and my policy in my office is actually do normal better. And if we can just do normal, uh, and get people the help and services that they need, I think
Mhm.
people are actually attracted to that. I I have heard very often this year that I am very outspoken and I say what's on my mind. I believe that is true. But when you look at what happens in the cycle of politics, super majorities happen all the time, but they also lose a lot of power at the same time, because that means if they have 100% of the control, they should have 100% of the blame. There are a lot of material failures that are about to show up that are nonpartisan, but they have to deal with who's in charge. And so we've got to realize, that working together with everybody needs to be our number one approach. And now, while I am very aggressive on what my beliefs are, and I stand on those foundations and values very, very hard, I never insult the individual. And I think that's what's different than some people have in the past, is that they'll go after people personally. But for me, I will always go after the policy. I don't go after the person. And every single one of my colleagues, if they were on the side of the road, if they needed help, I am more than happy to go and do so. Because no matter what, we are still all elected leaders in the state legislature. I think we all have families and we all have different reasons for why we care. And for me, I do care. I love this place. They've all signed up to do the same job. So when it comes to working with them personally, I think that's something that I can work with everybody and anybody on.
Mhm.
And policy disagreements, you can't get everybody to agree with you at a Thanksgiving table around your family. How are you supposed to do so with 80
Right.
headstrong assembly members? That's not going to happen. But I will say this, there is somebody that I do believe is a hero in Sacramento, and that is Assemblywoman Maggie Krell. She is, and I will always tell everybody this, she is somebody that stood strong in her values.
Mhm.
She couldn't be pushed away from any pressures coming from the party. And she stood strong on a child sex trafficking bill. And for me, that is the test of strength, because it's easy to be in the opposition party, to be in the opposition. but it's hard to be a part of the majority and to stand up and be alone a little bit. So anytime that I can give Maggie Krell her credit, I will say this, and she's not running for attorney general, but if she ever does, she'll have some bipartisan support.
Okay, good to hear. Now that you've served for a year in the legislature, what surprised you the most?
There are two things that I talk about. One, math is subjective, and two, doing the right thing isn't always good enough. And those have been two of the most surprising things. Um, I look at budgets and numbers, and I think they're pretty black and white, but that
Mhm.
is not true. And I say that as being on the budget committee. And, doing the right thing again, there are, again, this is where relationships actually matter, where if you want to get something heard, sometimes they're going to tell you one way or the other, this is how you can, or hey,
Mm.
you are speaking up a little bit too much. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with this. So those are the two most surprising things for me.
You have a background in real estate, realtor, helping people achieve the California dream or American dream. How has that informed your views on housing policy?
Uh, you know, Housing really is local. And I think that the state is somewhat overstepping. I think we are using the weaponization of government instead of the incentivization of government. And we should really try to help a lot of our local municipalities actually achieve some of the housing goals.
Mm.
We set the arena requirements and everything else, and we're just kind of telling everybody, do it the way we do it. Well, with a state like California, you're the fourth largest state geographically. You're the number one largest state when it comes to population. I mean, the city of Fresno itself has a larger population than the entire state of Alaska.
Mhm.
And yet we're trying to paint with such a broad brush when it comes to housing when different areas have different needs. The urban areas in San Francisco are very, very different than when it comes to Fresno. The Southern California is very different when it comes to Sonora. And I think that if we can help incentivize uh, local municipalities on accelerating some of their housing goals, I mean, we think about what happened with CEQA. We get rid of some of the CEQA requirements when it comes to infill housing, but then we create this vehicle miles travel bank that a lot of
Right.
people have no idea what is going to do. And I think I might have been the only member who voted no on that bill.
Yeah.
And the main reason why was because, if you're just streamlining the process with CEQA, but then you're making the cost the same, you're just blowing it up through the vehicle miles travel bank, that's not really helping. And again, that is coming from a state level and onto the requirements all for the local municipalities. But we were able to build housing before. You go back to the 1950s and 1960s, they exploded with housing
Mhm.
all over the place. I mean, you could order a house on a Macy's catalog, and
Mhm.
now we can't. Now it takes, just 2 years to get through entitlements.
Right.
We can get a lot better when it comes to housing. It's all local, and we should incentivize the local municipalities, not weaponize the state legislators who don't understand as much when it comes to their local municipalities, to force them into our own ideologies that really fit urban centers than it does some of the wide swaths of California.
What sort of, I guess a good way to think about that would be more carrot than stick. What sort of carrots would you think would help create more housing in California?
Well, now you're asking my favorite question when it comes to policy. I've actually been working with a lot of others, and I see these the impact fees that developers are going to have to go through. But I almost feel like there would be a great way if, with developer impact fees, we could actually get tax credits back to the developers who modernize the infrastructures. If they're able to put in wastewater treatment plants that actually benefit and we can expand these communities that are already part of it, well, instead of just having them pay these massive impact fees, let's allow the developers to actually redo it, pay for it through the private side, and then credit them back if they're able to create such a large scale. And especially if we have them work on some master plan agreements through state cities, and we
Uh-huh.
can see that where we can get a bunch of developers that pool their resources, they build the surface water treatment plants, the wastewater treatment plants, they create the pipes and fittings and road work that we're able to do, we'd actually really take a burden off of our local municipalities, which are all suffering from massive deficits. Like you
Right.
look at the city of LA, city of LA is in $1 billion deficit. City
Right.
of San Francisco's in an $800+ million deficit. San Diego, $200+ million deficit. Well, okay. Well, if we're going to need to consolidate at the local level on the government side, what can we do to incentivize the private side? And then how can we work with those same developers? If they are going to get tax credits back, they need to pass those cost savings back down to the purchaser and to the buyers. And I think that there are ways that we can actually incentivize developers to really work through the private sector to get what we need to do. Because sometimes just the cost of government is the one that's killing everybody.
Um, you represent a district that's quite varied politically. It's not a strict red or blue area. How are you able to navigate that?
Again, I think it just states on our main policy of do normal better. I don't wildfires is a really big issue in my
Uh-huh.
district, especially since I have most of the eastern Sierras. I mean, I'm 45 minutes away from Tahoe on the north, and I'm 45 minutes away from Vegas on the south. And then I just come into the city of Fresno and grab Fresno and Clovis.
Right.
Um, but the insurance is a nonpartisan issue. And I remember in my very first event that I ever did, they had asked all of the freshman legislators, what is the number one issue? And I told them, I was like, the number one issue is insurance. We are not in an insurance crisis. We are in an insurance catastrophe. And we are
Hmm.
one large scale disaster away from collapsing the entire system. And unfortunately, that did happen on January 7th, 2025,
Right.
with the LA wildfires. The position that the FAIR plan is in is devastating. The position that our insurance companies are in here, it doesn't work. I mean, they're insurance companies, they're not insurance charities. And we need to look at this from a risk mitigation type. So when I'm talking about that and I'm talking about insurance costs, it has nothing to do whether they're registered Democrat or Republican. They're both paying $10,000 to be on the FAIR plan.
Right.
It doesn't matter when it comes to their utility costs, which we've seen a 119% spike since 2018 because of the fires that happened in Paradise. You know, the fires didn't ask them what their registration was when it burned down their home. And this is very personal to me because my family's property was destroyed in the car fire
Oh,
up in
right.
Redding.
Yeah.
So I know it very, very well. I know what they're going through, and I understand the feelings that they've been through. And I've also worked one of the largest fires in California's history with the Creek Fire that burned over 800 structures in Fresno County alone. So this is personal to me, but it's also nonpartisan, and it's what I like to talk about. And I think that's what a lot of my district wants to focus on. If we can stay on insurance, if we can stay on the cost of living, if we can talk about housing and actually just forest management so that way people can live peacefully in their homes, that crosses all boundaries.
Yeah, it's interesting mentioned that because I've talked to some state legislators. A lot of them have mentioned kind of what you just did, which is legislators, regardless of party, in the higher fire zones, kind of have a unity of purpose that crosses the party lines. That there's a lot more. This is one area where there's been sort of bipartisan cooperation among members in those kind of areas. One thing that C.A.R. has been supportive of, which is the California Dream for All and other attempts to help first-time buyers get into properties. Any other further ideas? What else have you thought about as ways to maybe help get the first-time home buyer into property?
I
Mm.
understand the intended purpose of it.
Right.
But this is actually something that I've been working on with a different lens.
Hmm.
And it's actually a $10,000 tax credit to parents that actually help their kids, whether it's for down payment
Oh,
or for
interesting.
closing cost. So they would be able to depreciate their taxes by about $10,000, but they'd be giving their kids that, whether if they need about $10,000 just for closing costs, or maybe they need some money. So it'd be at max, it's a $10,000 credit, but
Mm.
any money that they give to their kids within that time frame, or an extended family member, grandparents all the way down to that first-time home buyer, we think that that would be something that would be very beneficial, especially when we see more than one-fourth of all homes for first-time home buyers are used parents' money or family money is coming in to help them. And so I just wanted to find a way. How do we incentivize more of that? How do
So
we
that
also get like, hey, if you tell your parents, like, look, if you do a $10,000 credit, $5,000 for my down payment, and maybe $5,000 for my closing costs, we'd actually be able to take a next step. And then the incentivization for their parents would be that they get a $10,000 depreciation. So I like to look at it through that lens as giving, yeah, again, that's the carrot for me. that if they want to help out their kid, they could do $5,000 and just get a $5,000 tax write-off. And so the other one that we were really looking at that I'm actually trying to work with some of my friends in Congress
Hmm.
is zero capital gains taxes on properties that are sold to first-time home buyers.
Right.
But
Right.
but if you do sell to corporations, that still falls within the same parameters.
Right.
But there should be zero capital gains to give a little bit more of a competitive advantage. Where I'm okay with somebody selling to a corporation,
Hmm.
I just want to let that 70-year-old who owns a 2,000 square foot, 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom
Right.
house that doesn't have any kids, that they're an empty nester, maybe their master bedroom's upstairs and they want to downsize. I want to give them that opportunity to sell to a first time generation instead of competing against an LLC or competing against some type of investor, just to give that competitive advantage. So if an investor wants to come in, they could still try to purchase the home, but that 70-year-old knows that they have zero taxes paid on that property that maybe they bought in the 1950s for, I actually, this was a home that I did sell. They bought the home in Concord for
Oh, Concord.
$13,000. For $13,000. They sold the home for $800,000
Yeah.
and she was
Oh
93
my
years
God.
old.
Yeah.
So it's just giving, and she still had to pay taxes because of that $250,000 buffer that she had, and that's all she had. And so we wanted to make sure that if that would incentivize that next generation or the older generation to pass down to the next generation, that's something that we again could use a carrot for.
You mentioned earlier that you represented a lot of people who it might have been their first time ever purchasing a home, or maybe even within their family or generational history of getting a home, and you kind of help them see that opportunity. Do you think there's other things that could be done to help a lot of people in that situation realize that home ownership is something that's possible? Because I think a lot of people, it is possible. It doesn't even occur to them to talk to a bank or a realtor. And what do you think? Maybe is there a state role in something like that, or what would you suggest for maybe just even making people aware of the opportunities that do exist?
I think we need to make it mandatory in high school. I think with some of the rules that were passed last year, I think we add in how to buy a house, how to save up.
Mhm.
My biggest issue and I grew up in the hood, I would always tell everybody, I was like, if you've got 10 pairs of Jordans, diamond chains, gold earrings, and everything else, and you rent where you sleep, you're not a baller. And I would talk to them about how, again, my friend bought a home with only $5,000. That
Mhm.
was cheaper than the money he put down for his car because of the Wish program
Right.
that Union Bank was giving. Nobody knew about it, but I was able to go and find it. And again, that provides the value that a realtor can provide
Right.
to
Right.
people when they don't want to. Is I was able to find so much more out there for him, but I was able to do that with a lot of other friends of mine as well. But I think if we start with more financial literacy back in high school, I think we can get to a point that, I mean, it almost should be a requirement that each high school student should be able to save $10,000 as a requirement
Right.
before they get out of high school. I mean, it's not hard, through those months that you can really, through high school, you can have like a savings account. And I think that's what we should start, and that they're not allowed to touch until they get out of high school. And whether they want to use that for college or a down payment on a home or something else, I almost feel like that should be a requirement of actually teaching people money management. It's a terrifying thing that over 50% of the nation's population lives paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
That would give me anxiety. So maybe we can help people out by having more of that role for the 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Then you finish high school and you've saved up, whether it's $5,000 or $10,000, and then you can do whatever you want with that.
Yeah, it's you raise an interesting point because as you mentioned, and this is true of many realtors, they help educate people when they're approached. But to even think about hiring or to go to a realtor is that first step. And yeah, it seems like that's a gap there that a lot of people just don't even know where to begin. So you think some sort of class or orientation in school for that purpose would be a good way to go.
Well, I know we just passed that law that there is some financial requirements that are going to be for high school that
Right.
I know that the bankers were working on. I just think that it should be part of the education portion. If there's already a law there, well, let's write in something that actually has to deal with educating people on how to buy a home. Um, what can we do to just provide that additional value?
Right. And understand mortgage products and everything else, correct? Before we conclude, what recommendations or advice do you have to our members to get their voices heard? What works to get your attention?
For me, I try to make myself as available as possible. But here's the biggest thing. My biggest issue is I think people are forgetting to invite us to stuff because they feel like we don't want to bother him. And I get that a lot. They're like, well, we see how busy you are and we don't want to bother you. I was like, no, I want to see it. And especially when it comes to realtors. They make some of the most amazing business and people blend in our communities. We know that there are realtors out there that just do such a good job at taking care of the people, but I also think that they make some of the best um, personal sales. I
Mm-hmm.
want them to be so much more involved because I think we do know people and business in our community a whole lot better
Right.
than most people do. Um, and the main reason why is, and I've told everybody this, that when you're in sales and you're working as a realtor, you can you rarely sell the 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, but you
Uh,
sell the nicest schools, the best neighborhoods. These are
right.
the cleanest communities. But to know that, you have to be invested in the community. And that is a lot of the value that realtors can really give to people. You can find a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in the worst area, but it's not what you were looking for. Because when some people are looking for the nicer schools, the great communities, you really want somebody that's actually blended into the community. And I want realtors to know they should reach out more. I want
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the MLSs really need to start contacting their local electeds because I can tell them this right now. The number one issue for everybody has to deal with their home, whether they can buy a home, stay in the home, or afford the home. It will be the number one issue, and that gives you a great opportunity to really have a seat at the table and make some demands of what we need to do to get it done. Because in California, it cannot be acceptable that the average home price is $850,000.
Mind-boggling.
It cannot be acceptable. And if we wait any longer, the average home price will be $1 million. We
Right.
need to really start getting everybody focused right now. And I think realtors have a seat at the table. I think the California Association of Realtors does a really good job at advocating, but I think we could take that to the next level. And if there's anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out to my office. I am not too busy.
All right. Our members will definitely take advantage of that. And Assemblymember Tangipa, it's been a real pleasure talking with you today.
Hey,
Thank
if
you.
there's anything you need from me, always feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you so much.
Disclaimer. The purpose of this podcast, brought to you by the California Association of Realtors, C.A.R., is to provide general and educational information and opinions from a wide range of perspectives regarding politics, voting, elections, legislative issues, and more. The opinions, beliefs, and views expressed by guests or participants of this podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, beliefs, or views of C.A.R., its affiliates, their respective directors, officers, or employees. Reference to any individual or entity does not constitute an endorsement, recommendation, or any other position or opinion regarding that entity or individual by C.A.R. This podcast does not constitute professional advice or services of any kind. This podcast is available for private, non-commercial use only. You may not edit, modify, or redistribute this podcast.